Well, good afternoon. This afternoon on the House floor, we intended to take up House File 445 and pass that. After we watched what happened in the Minnesota Senate, which was a very bitter, very partisan debate, it was clear that there's not bipartisan support on moving forward with an approach at this time. We were informed by Republican leadership in the Minnesota House that we did not have a single Republican vote. And we thought rather than answer the Senate's action of a bitter and partisan debate with another bitter and partisan debate in the Minnesota House of Representatives, that we would go back to conversations with our Republican colleagues and see if we can't come together around an approach that can get bipartisan support. And with that, I would turn it over to the Majority Leader.
We are committed to making sure that our cities are safe, that we are protecting the First Amendment, the right to protest, that we are protecting businesses and homes and lives in the wake of the passion and importance of the issue related to the killing of George Floyd and the murder trial of Derek Chauvin and his fellow police officers. Minnesota expects that law enforcement, expects the state and the city and the county and everyone else involved in protecting public safety in our state to come forward and do the right thing. We are very confident that they're in the city of Minneapolis, with the help of the county and with state resources, they are way to being prepared for the Chauvin trial. We need to make sure that as we go forward with a bill to fund these resources, that we do so in a bipartisan way, because there is no other way for us to make this bill law. We need the cooperation of Republicans in order to pay for public safety. I think we're open to questions.
Yep. First one is Mary LaHammer. Go ahead.
Hi, Madam Speaker. You've talked about Republicans and not having Republican support. We hear there was problems in your own caucus too, and that Democrats were divided on this. What can you say about that?
We would have needed a few Republican votes, I believe, to pass the bill today. You never know until the board is open how people will vote. But we were informed by the Republican leadership that there was not a single Republican vote. And so without a single Republican vote, we did not feel that there would be 68 votes.
And if I can follow up, how many Democratic votes do you think you are going to lose as well?
Again, it's never clear until the board opens, right? You have the long debate, you have discussion of amendments, people change their minds, but we would have needed, I believe, a handful of Republicans to be willing to support the bill today.
Okay, next up is Bill Werner. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker, Mr. Leader. Given that you haven't got 100% Democratic support for this bill, what kind of message does that send to your constituency? You heard I'm sure what Representative Mariani said, that this is an essential thing to really address the root causes of George Floyd's killing. He says he's prepared to make a major concession. I think we probably have an idea what that is. But what kind of message does this send to your central constituencies in the core of Minneapolis and St. Paul as to your commitment to actually fix this problem?
Well, what it says is that we actually need Republicans and Democrats who are both committed to funding a solution. You know, as the Majority Leader pointed out, it's not a matter of whether the preparations are underway or whether law enforcement will be there to back one another up. When there was a shooting at the Buffalo Clinic the other day, there was no state fund, but people offered mutual aid. So the question is not will the mutual aid be provided, but is simply how will the mutual aid be paid for? Right now, under existing state law, communities pay one another for mutual aid. The question is whether we need a state fund and whether we can have a bipartisan consensus that there should be a state fund to provide for extraordinary law enforcement expenses when those occur, rather than relying on the existing system of mutual aid. Now, last summer, Minnesota communities, counties, and cities received a real big boost in CARES Act funding. We shipped out $841 million to cities and counties, which they were all free to use for their law enforcement budgets if they did not have coronavirus related expenses in the amounts that they received. So we do know that they received quite a bit of assistance from the federal government last year. It's possible that more will be coming this year. And so regardless of whether we are able to get bipartisan support to create a state fund to pay for mutual aid, that mutual aid will happen and it will be compensated.
Well, Madam Speaker, if I may follow up, though, you and others have said that the mutual aid is going to come regardless, that the blue will step up if push really comes to shove. And I think a lot of people believe that. So given that particular situation, why at this early stage trade away what I think a lot of people feel is one of the real core principles of the Democratic Party, which is to get this problem solved, that resulted in the death of George Floyd? Why, trade that away at this point? Forgive me for putting it that way, but I think folks will see it that way.
I don't know what you're referring to when you're talking about trading away. I would say what Chair Mariani put into the bill were some very important accountability measures that really substantially improved the bill. Chair Mariani took what was a basic, pretty straightforward state fund that would fund a law enforcement response and said, hey, wait a minute, in a state that is less than a year from George Floyd's killing and the unrest that followed, we cannot just have a bill that straight up funds public safety and does not acknowledge that we have to have a continuing conversation about accountability. And so he included measures in there to allow co-responders in the community, other first responders, to be a part of interrupting civil unrest. He included in there an after action report to take a look at how we respond to mass events like this to see if we can do better. And so I think Chair Mariani really substantially improved the bill, and I think it was worthy of bipartisan support. We just do not have that bipartisan support at this time.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. Or thank you, Madam Speaker. I mean, forgive me.
Okay, next is Esme Murphy.
You're muted, Esme.
Yeah.
Very long day on Zoom. Madam Speaker and Mr. Majority Leader, can I ask you, to what degree is the Minneapolis City Council's positions on defunding the police, a position that not all members of your party in any way share or believe in, to what degree does that continue to make it difficult to not only get more conservative members of your party on board, but also to get Republicans?
I don't think that the actions of the Minneapolis City Council, in either their initial statement about defunding the police or their budgeting, in which they substantially have actually followed up on continuing the existing police presence, I don't think that has anything to do with whether the state of Minnesota and whether other law enforcement agencies will be there to protect the people of Minneapolis and St. Paul and surrounding communities in the event of a major event of civil unrest. Should we have that situation in place, it doesn't matter what the City Council of Minneapolis has to say about it. What matters is the lives and property and safety and freedom of speech of the people of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and surrounding communities. So I don't think it has anything to do with that. And that's why law enforcement supports this bill, because they know that we need to have resources in place to ensure public safety.
Madam Speaker, I mean, it just seems like at every single turn, the Minneapolis City Council in their past positions comes up and it's almost a rallying cry of sorts, and has become so. It's being credited with one of the reasons that you folks didn't get, the majority in the Senate. But you think it has nothing to do with it?
Well, I would say that Republicans have used the city of Minneapolis as a foil from a political standpoint for a long period of time. There's a reason that Governor Tim Walz ran a campaign on a One Minnesota platform, is we have had a Republican Party, as they have lost the suburbs and been relegated only to representing greater Minnesota, that they have attempted to create a divide or to magnify a divide and to demonize the cities. And so quite apart from what the city of Minneapolis has done, if you look at the last probably 3 or 4 campaigns that Republicans have run in this state, they've been running against Minneapolis and St. Paul as though the residents of Minneapolis and St. Paul are Minnesotans that are any less worthy of investment and support as any other Minnesotan in the rest of the state. Now, I don't know why that's been their chosen approach. I think it's divisive. I think it's not benefiting our state. But I don't think that it's contingent on the actions of the city of Minneapolis.
Do you think in any way it is racially charged?
You know, I do think that we have seen a lot of campaigning that has had those undertones. We had campaign literature that darkened the faces of Black members of the Minnesota Senate that was used in 2014. There's definitely been racialized language used in the campaigns of 14 and 16 and 18. And I do know we had several conversations with our Republican colleagues after George Floyd's death to request that people take responsibility for their campaign rhetoric and that we not further the divide among people along the lines of race, because I think, you know, that old Southern strategy, that has been something that has been relied upon in politics, and it's detrimental to our state when it happens.
Thank you.
Okay, next question is from Ricardo Lopez. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I was a little late, so I hope that this question hasn't already been asked or addressed in any way. But I had a question about sort of some of the resistance among members of the House DFL caucus, in particular, some from the Minneapolis area who I understand were intending to vote against the Safe Account bill. You know, they had some issues with you know, giving $35 million to law enforcement. And so I'm just curious, you know, from what I understand and had in my story earlier, there was as many as 4 of them who were going to vote against the bill if it come to a vote. Curious if that is the reason why the bill was tabled today, and if the tabling of the bill today in any way signifies a setback for Governor Walz and for leadership on this bill.
The reason the bill was tabled today was because we had not a single Republican vote for the bill. The vast majority of the DFL caucus would have voted for this bill today, but we did not have a single Republican vote.
And
to follow up,
wait, Ricardo, I just wanted to say a storyline that says that concerns about this bill only come from particular parts of the state or particular members of one party is not accurate. There are concerns about this bill from all quarters.
Right, but there are 70 House DFL members. So without any Republican votes, if you had all DFL members, you'd be able to pass the bill, no?
That's right. And we did not have 68 votes on the DFL side.
Okay.
Okay, got just a couple more minutes, so we can try to get 2 more questions we can get through quick here. Dana Ferguson, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I am wondering if you can tell us a little bit about where conversations stand between the chambers and various caucuses. Is there any sort of contingency plan out there, anything that has found agreement yet?
Well, Senator Gazelka and I have had conversations about this, and Senator Rosen and I, and we all share a desire to do something. But we have not been able to find a pathway that has bipartisan support. Certainly the approach that the Minnesota Senate chose today is not supported. My understanding was by the law enforcement community, by Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, by cities or counties. And the approach that we intended to pursue today is not supported by Republicans. So we are going to need to be a little bit creative, because clearly the Senate approach currently and the House approach currently are not able to garner support from the other side of the aisle.
Okay, last question from Kevin Featherly. Go ahead.
Thanks. Along the lines, can you hear me, by the way? I got the speaker on.
A little staticky, but we can hear you.
2 things real quick. You may have addressed this earlier, like Ricardo, I joined late. The debate on the bill began
and it was underway at the point where this was pulled off the table, which seems really unusual. Did you not know you didn't have the votes? That's the first question. The second question is, Rep. Garofalo said a few days ago that the Brian Johnson amendment, the minority report, is the bill that can pass. I think he said with 100 votes. Is that likely going to be where we wind up here? Is the Johnson amendment, which is pretty close to the original bill from the governor, is that what we're going to see returning onto the floor at some point?
No, the reason why we tabled the bill when we did is we were informed by House leadership on the Republican side that there were 0 Republican votes for the bill. So if we would have had a modicum of support from the Republicans today, we would have proceeded with the bill.
Okay. What about the other part, the Johnson bill, the amendment?
I do not think that legislation that looks like that can pass the Minnesota House.
But isn't that really close to what the governor actually did propose?
I think the work that Chair Mariani did was very important. You have to think about, why is it that we're having this conversation in the first place? We're having murder trials for 4 Minneapolis police officers that are capturing the attention of the world. And why is that? That is because of the conduct of police in the first place. And so to have a bill that ignores the fact that there's still a police accountability issue, and that when we have a mass event and when we rely on our law enforcement professionals, that we should have an after action report and make sure that we're living up to our standards, that would ignore the reality of why we are where we are. So I think that the Johnson approach is overly simplistic at this point in Minnesota's history.
Thank you.
Okay, last question, Jesse Van Berkel, go ahead.
I was just curious about the timeline for next steps to reach a deal, and whether you think you can get something in place ahead of the start of the Chauvin trial.
Well, I'm already in conversation with Senator Gazelka, so we'll see about that, and we'll continue to have conversations with the House Republican leadership.
It's important to, I think, restate that preparations for that trial are not dependent on passage of this bill.
All right, and that's it for questions. I don't know, Speaker or Majority Leader, if either one of you have any closing comments.
I think it's just really important to reiterate what the Majority Leader has said. We have checked in with the public safety professionals, and the planning is well underway. The mutual aid agreements and the joint command structure is well underway. So the question that we're dealing with is the compensation mechanism for law enforcement that could be called into other communities to assist, whether it's something like the Chauvin trial or something like the situation that happened in Buffalo. Will we be relying on the existing pattern of mutual aid agreements, or will we create a statewide fund to support communities? That's the question on the table.
All right. Thanks, everybody.